learn about the greats of history, we're often hit with people like Cyrus the Great, Darius the Great, Alexander the Great, and Peter the Great. All of these people were successful monarchs to their homelands. To be a successful monarch, one must be a positive ruler to their land. Maybe they win battles. Maybe they conquer more land. Or maybe they bring peace and stability upon their nation. But no matter what it was that they did during their reign, they did something so good and so positive that they left behind a legacy of greatness. If you ever look up the greats from history, you're going to be hit with a long list of various men from various countries. And that's the major thing that they had in common. They were men. But there were a handful of women who went down as one of the greats as well. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. But we're going to be focusing on one individual woman. A woman who ruled over a country that she wasn't even born in. A woman who ruled over a country whose native language she didn't speak. A woman who ruled a country that she took right out of the hands of her husband. And let me go ahead and apologize because I'm probably going to be mispronouncing a lot of these names of people and places, mostly because of my yeehaw accent. Born with the name Sophie of Anhalt-Zerbst, a district in Germany, this woman is most remembered as Catherine the Great. Catherine was the reigning Empress of Russia from 1762 to 1796. She came to power after overthrowing her husband, Peter III. Under her long reign, she was inspired by many ideas from the Enlightenment. She helped guide Russia into a culture of renaissance and rebirth. And this led to the founding of many new Russian cities and universities as well. And all of this led to a large-scale immigration to Russia from the rest of Europe. And all of these positive things led to Russia being known and recognized as one of the great powers of Europe. Catherine was responsible for the rapid growth of the Russian Empire through conquest and diplomacy. For example, in the south, the Crimean Khanate was annexed after Russia won in the Russo-Turkish War. And with the support from Great Britain, Russia also colonized territories of the New Russia along the coast of the Black and Azov Seas. In the west, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth became part of the Russian Empire as well. And in the east, the Russians became the first Europeans to colonize Alaska, which established a Russian America. Many cities and towns were founded on Catherine's conquest of these newly acquired lands. Cities such as Yekaterinoslav, Kherson, Nikolaev, and Sevastopol. As an admirer of Peter the Great, Catherine wanted to follow in his footsteps and continue to modernize and push Russia to be more like the Western European cities. Catherine is often included in the ranks of the enlightened despots. As a patron of the arts, she presided over the age of the Russian Enlightenment. Finally, Catherine is also well known for establishing the first state-paid higher education institution for women in all of Europe. Catherine was born into the Kingdom of Prussia, which is modern-day Germany. From this point forward, if I mention Prussia, Russia with a P, Prussia, I'm referring to what has become modern-day Germany. Catherine was born as Princess Sophie Friedrich August von Anhalt-Zerbst-Dornberg. Her parents belonged to the ruling German family of Anhalt. Her father held the rank of a Prussian general in his capacity as governor of the city of Stettin. Catherine's mother's side of the family were Swedish royalty. Two of Catherine's first cousins actually go on to later become kings of Sweden. Growing up, Catherine received education chiefly from French tutors. According to her memoirs, she's often regarded as a tomboy and even trained herself how to master the sword. Though technically she was born a princess, her family actually had very little money. Her rise to power was often supported by her mother's wealthy relatives who were nobles and had royal relations. Growing up, Catherine was groomed to become the wife of a wealthy ruler in order to make her family more powerful. And at the age of 10, she met her future husband and second cousin, Peter III of Russia. According to her writings, she actually found Peter to be detestable upon meeting him. She didn't like his pale complexion or his fondness of alcohol, and she later wrote that she stayed in one end of the castle while Peter stayed on the total opposite side. Ultimately, it was her family that made the choice for Catherine to marry Peter. The choice to have the young princess marry a future czar was because of an agreement. There was an agreement made in order to strengthen the relationship between Prussia and Russia and weaken the influence of Austria. Catherine officially arrived in Russia in 1744 at the age of 16, and she wasted no time to meet and mingle with the Russian people. But in order to build relationships with the Russian people, she had to learn something, how to speak Russian. She applied herself to learn the Russian language. She would often stay up late and repeat the language lessons that she had had prior in the day to strengthen her grip on the language. In her memoirs, she wrote then that she made the decision to do whatever she needed to do to become qualified to wear the crown. Although she did come to master the language, she still kept her German accent. Soon after arriving in Russia, Catherine became sick and almost died. She credited her survival to bloodletting, and in a single day, she received 4 phlebotomies. She trusted early medicine. So remember that Catherine was actually born with the name Sophie. Her father was a devout German Lutheran. Sophie converted to Eastern Orthodoxy and joined the Russian Orthodox Church on June 28, 1744. And it was then that she took the new name of Catherine. She named herself after Peter's grandmother, Catherine I. The following year, on August 21st, 1745, the long-planned marriage between Catherine and Peter finally took place in St. Petersburg just after Catherine turned 16. Her father was so upset with her for converting to Eastern Orthodoxy that he refused to travel to Russia for his daughter's wedding. The marriage between Catherine and Peter was bad. It was just a bad marriage, a bad match. And it actually wasn't consummated for many years because of Peter's mental immaturity. But after Peter got himself a mistress, Catherine became more involved with the prominent court figures. She soon became very popular with powerful political groups that opposed her husband being the Tsar. Catherine was also just very bored of her husband. So she turned to what most of us do when we're bored: books. She mostly read books from France. And it was during this period that she read the writings of Voltaire and other prominent French Enlightenment philosophers. And as she learned Russian, she became very interested in the literature coming from her adopted country. After reading Annals by Tacitus, Catherine had a revolution in her teenage mind, because Tacitus was the first intellectual she read who understood power politics as they are, and not how they're supposed to be. She was impressed with his argument that people do not act for their professed idealistic reasons, but instead they look for the hidden and interested motives. At this point, Peter had not taken the throne yet. In order for Catherine and Peter to be considered the rightful heirs of the throne, Peter's mother, Elizabeth, told them that they had to produce a healthy heir to continue the royal bloodline. And it may have been like pulling teeth, but Catherine and Peter eventually had their first son, who later became known as Paul I. After the death of Peter's mother on January 5th, 1762, Peter succeeded the throne as Emperor Peter III, and Catherine became Empress Consort. The imperial couple would move into the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. As Peter ruled, something became very evident. He was not a good leader. His eccentricities and policies had alienated the same groups that Catherine had worked so hard to cultivate as allies. Russia and Prussia were supposed to be in alliance at this time, but for some reason, Peter had the Russians fighting the Prussians in the 7-Year War. And during that time, Russian troops had taken over Berlin in 1761. But Peter really admired the King of Prussia, Frederick II. He admired him so much that the Russian nobility withdrew their support from him, and this led Peter to cease Russian operations against Prussia, and Frederick suggested the partition of Polish territories with Russia. So Peter's going back and forth, fighting the Prussians but loving their king. Peter also got involved in a dispute between his territory of Holstein and Denmark over the province of Schleswig. So Peter did what any logical king or ruler would do at this point. He decided to talk it out with him. No, I'm kidding. Peter planned a war against Denmark, which was typically Russia's strongest ally that they had, against Sweden. 6 months into his reign, in July 1762, Peter hung out a lot at another residence, Oranienbaum, with some of his family and his courtiers, all while Catherine lived in a totally separate palace. And it was during this time that Catherine and a group of close companions conspired together on ways that they could get rid of Peter so Catherine could be the sole ruler of Russia. They had been meeting for months, conspiring on ways to remove Peter from the equation. And besides Peter just being a horrible and awful ruler, he was also not nice. He publicly humiliated Catherine many times at court meetings, and enough was enough. With her close ties to the military, noble classes, and the church, the bored and humiliated 33-year-old Catherine saw an opportunity for change, and she began plotting a coup with her military officer lover, Grigory Orlov. The night of July 8, 1762, Catherine had been informed that one of her co-conspirators had been arrested by Peter, so the coup that they had been planning needed to take place immediately. The next day, she left the palace and departed for one of the best army regiments in Russia. Once there, she delivered a speech asking the soldiers to protect her from her husband. After giving her speech, she went back to the army barracks. And it was there that the clergy was waiting for her to ordain her as the sole ruler of the Russian throne. And it was then in that moment that she began her reign as Catherine II, Empress of Russia. She had her husband arrested and forced to sign an abdication to the throne, and this abdication left no one to dispute her accession to the throne. 8 days after the coup that amazed the outside world, Peter III died in Russia, and this was 6 months after he officially became Emperor of Russia. Peter was supposedly assassinated, but it's actually unknown how he died. The official cause after an autopsy was a severe case of colic and a stroke. Whether or not Catherine had a hand in Peter's death is up for historical debate, but the death of Peter was certainly convenient for the new Empress of Russia. And at the time of Peter's overthrow, there were actually some potential rivals that could take the throne instead of Catherine, one being Ivan VI, a cousin of Peter. Ivan was a threat to Catherine and the Russian throne. He had been confined to a remote location from the age of 6 months and was thought to be insane. But Ivan was assassinated during an attempt to free him as part of a failed coup to overthrow Catherine. Another potential rival was Princess Tara Kavova, but she used fake names to seem like she was from important Russian families when she really wasn't. On September 22nd, 1762, Catherine II was crowned at the Assumption Cathedral in Moscow. Her coronation marked the creation of one of the main treasures of the Romanov dynasty, the Imperial Crown of Russia. Inspired by Byzantine design, the crown was constructed of 2 half spheres, one gold and one silver, representing the Eastern and Western Roman empires. The crown contained 75 pearls and 4,936 Indian diamonds that form laurel and oak leaves, and those are the symbols of power and strength. The pearls and diamonds are around a huge ruby that previously belonged to Peter's mother Elizabeth, and it includes a diamond cross. From 1762, the Great Imperial Crown was the crown used at coronations of all Romanov monarchs, up until the monarchy's abolition in 1917. Although Catherine herself did not descend from the Romanov dynasty, her ancestors come from the Rurik dynasty. The Rurik dynasty had preceded the Romanovs as rulers of Russia. Catherine was the longest reigning empress of Russia. Her greatest achievements included establishing educational reform, funding the arts, and extending Russia's borders in the largest territorial gain since Ivan the Terrible. She led her country into full participation of European culture and politics. In short, Catherine westernized Russia. All of these accomplishments led Empress Catherine II of Russia to be known today as Catherine the Great. Catherine wasn't born in Russia, but she married into the Russian monarchy and fell in love with the country. Never in love with Peter, but definitely in love with Russia. And she saw this country that she loved being mistreated by her husband. So she took it. She took matters into her own hands, overthrew her husband, and went down as one of the greats in history. If you learned something new or enjoyed this video, click that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel. Would I overthrow my husband for power? Yes.